everyone, and welcome back. This is session 6,
Yeah.
whopping session 6 of Roll 2 DMs. I am your host, Josue, or Mellow. I am joined here by Solomon, or
Yeah.
Solomon, or
Or
Solomon,
Solomon. Yeah. Or Suleiman.
or Suleiman.
Yeah.
Uh, how are you doing today, Solomon? I'm
Doing good.
a little tired,
Doing good.
but
Doing good.
I'm ready for the topic of today because
Got that G Fuel in the.
not sponsored.
Not
yet.
sponsored.
Yet.
Yet. Fingers
Um,
crossed. You know,
but yeah,
you never know.
Dude, hit us up if anyone knows G Fuel. Hit them up. Anyway, so today we're tackling what's probably going to be a multi-parter.
Yeah. At
Um,
least 2 parts. I would
yeah.
say.
I don't know if we'll hit everything we even want to talk about today.
Yeah.
We have a lot of slides prepared, but just in case to see how long this goes. But today's topic is combat, which is a hefty one. Not just because obviously combat is kind of the other primary mechanic that makes up D&D outside of like the RP.
Yeah.
But also because there's so many things that are kind of entrapped or like encased in what we call combat. So
Yeah.
there's definitely tons to talk about.
It's one. In most games, you level up via combat.
Yeah.
It's pretty much an integral part to a majority of just standard D&D 5e. Whether that be through leveling up via XP or through milestones. Almost always, well, depends actually. That can be very much a topic of discussion. But majority of the times, even with milestones, the DM usually assigns a level up after a really big fight.
Right. Yeah, and definitely I think there's obviously also differing opinions.
Yeah.
And combat also varies across the generations of games that we've seen.
Most assuredly. Yeah.
I know a lot of people that are big proponents of like, 3.5e.
Shout out to Matt.
Yeah, shout out to Matt. 3.5e, things from 4th edition.
Yeah.
Obviously the game has changed a lot. So those are probably things that we'll actually we'll cover more of like the nuanced things about combat. I think in the next section.
Depends on what people are really interested
Yeah,
in.
exactly.
Let us know what exactly you all want us to talk about, and we'll tackle it.
Most definitely. So yeah, let us know. Let us know what you want to hear. We'll also be looking at the chat. So if you're in the chat, let us know if you have any questions. But with that being said, I think that means we can probably just roll into the first question, or I guess like the first topic that we want to cover today. And that is, how often do you use combat? Just in general, how do you like to mix in combat into your campaigns?
Sporadically.
Sporadically.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about, I guess, obviously, like, different ways to do it. In terms of, like, volume, though, which I guess is, like, kind of more of just a general question. And by the way, I'll preface this. I was thinking about this earlier. I was just kind of, like, looking over some of my notes. And I'll preface this by saying I think one of the primary answers we're probably going to give today is it depends.
Which I feel like we should just name the podcast now. Like,
it depends. It depends. Talk to your DM.
Yeah.
But for a lot of these situations, it's going to be entirely dependent.
Case,
on what your game looks like. So obviously, we'll give you guys our perspectives, and we'll give you perspectives on some other games that we've either heard of or played in. You already kind of mentioned so sporadically. That's how you kind of like to mix in your combat.
No, personally for me, especially with the games I'm running right now, like both of them, they're usually like narrative focused to the most degree, but sometimes I really run combat when it makes sense to run combat. I'm very much on the boat of being against random encounters for the sake of random encounters. No D12s on my end, but I very much just prefer I remember one time I ran like 3 combat sessions back to back.
Mm-hmm.
Like between interspersed traversal and transportation.
Right.
The majority it was very much the party fought one thing that was optional. The party fought one thing that I planned for them to encounter, and then the party went deeper in, and they went back, and we kind of gloss over the whole you go back home, you long rest, and y'all go back essentially. And they essentially did like 3 combat rounds in the same very much 2 combats in one session, 1 combat in the other session, and after that we didn't do combat for I think like 5 sessions.
Okay. So it was like it was a pretty significant
exactly
gap.
And sometimes and then other times it's like every other session, maybe once or twice that happened, or maybe every other 2 sessions. So very much it's I cannot really like say how often I run it as much as I run it when I feel like the players and I want to run combat.
For sure. I definitely use it almost entirely thematically. I like to use it sometimes earlier in session or like earlier in campaigns a little bit more. Just
Combat
because
does pull the party together.
exactly right. It's kind of like a tool to kind of get the party all on the same page because unless you have some like real bastards in your party, most of the time if they walk up to some sort of confrontation or something that involves combat, a lot of times people will get involved. So that's exactly right. That's a really easy way to.
You might find that one player that's like, "I'll take my action to look around."
Yeah. Which is totally
which is totally fine. But sometimes you get the vibe of everyone's going into combat and going in ham and stuff, and this one guy is like, "Can I pick this lock?" Sure, you can for sure.
Skill check instead of throwing my dagger.
Like it might get like a couple of chuckles from everyone else who's like just taken back, but sometimes it works.
Right.
It works and it's a good mechanic to do.
So that's why I like interspersing combat a little bit more on the earlier sessions.
That's fair.
And then after that, it's almost entirely thematic. So if they make it to the checkpoint where there's where I've kind of written out that they're supposed to fight someone, sometimes it's pretty rare, but sometimes I'll put in a random encounter if it'll kind of corral people in the right direction.
Oh yeah.
But that's really
that's not really random as much as you. Yeah.
I guess it's like not strictly prepared combat that I'm like I am intending to run this. It's like, oh, I don't think they're exactly like pieces, getting where they're supposed to go. Yeah. Let me just put this in here, and it'll probably, And sometimes they don't even actually have to fight it. I might put in combat in front of them that is obviously really really over their level, and they'll just run.
No, for sure.
Though a lot of parties refuse to run, which is I guess low key tip. Never forget you can technically always run from a fight. Doesn't mean you'll get away, but you can always try.
Yeah, and very true, very true. I remember, in the case of like, I think last session, like last week, and I was playing in a game. It was shout out to Kobe. Like in his game, we technically like snuck past 3 combat encounters. And that we were that we could have fought and stuff, and sometimes just works out like that. The whole party rolls well on stealth, nature checks, investigation checks, perception checks, chooses not to engage in a possibly hostile entity. You come out with all your spell slots ready to fight a bigger fight, and not suffer from the previous fights.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. I like to, so in terms of I guess volume, my campaigns are definitely on the lower end of running combat.
Yeah.
I know that there's like, I think like the traditional style of D&D is very much like combat interaction, combat interaction, combat interaction.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's a great structure to like start with when you're first DMing.
For sure.
And it's definitely a valid structure moving forward if that's something that you like.
Fine, yeah.
If that's something you like, go for it. I know people that like to run even small pieces of like small combat encounters every session, and it happens a lot when your party has like a propensity to split up.
Oh,
so like if this happens probably the most honestly in downtime, like isolated fights.
Yeah. True.
Whenever you have like downtime, sometimes like people like split, and because it's downtime, like characters are free to kind of explore. If you missed our episode, we're now uploading on YouTube.
Yes.
I forgot to mention.
You can use the exclamation point YouTube.
Do I have a command for YouTube now? We will be uploading VODs of these, so if you ever miss an episode,
I'll be on the channel. Yeah,
definitely hop on there and check it out. So last time we talked about downtime, and especially in downtime, like every little session that you run during downtime can have some degree of combat if it turns out that the players are kind of like running into it.
Oh no, for sure. Yeah, especially like if the players want to mug someone or do a heist, even though it's just 3 players and they get caught, they're gonna fight someone. You can't I would say like lots of times there's a point where you can't really rationalize not having combat. If the players are trying to be hostile to someone and the person responds like a logical person would and defend themselves, that's almost for sure going to be combat.
Yeah, exactly. Combat comes in a lot of different systems or comes in a lot of different like forms.
Yeah.
And you can utilize different like systems within your combat to also make it significantly different
For sure.
each time. I know when I'm running shorter interactions, sometimes I'll run combat and I'll completely go rogue off of the rules. Mostly in fist fighting.
Interesting.
Like whenever you
yeah.
have like any like tavern brawls,
Fair enough.
I like to just like I really just mess the rules up a lot.
yeah.
I usually just give
There's
people
the
like
tavern
a
brawler
damage
feat.
die. That's true.
Which you should, yeah. Which technically speaking, that is the way to do it. You know?
Right.
Like they give you those tools, but then the thing is, you can always just not use those tools
Yeah.
and give everyone tavern brawler.
Yeah, and sometimes
Yeah,
I've
it
done
works.
I've done word fisticuffs like where I literally have like I remember at one point I introduced a talking sword.
Oh.
Yeah, I think they named him William.
Mm.
But basically the
Very much a sword
the
name,
sword was
yeah.
kind of like a princess. So he
Gotcha.
was like whoever defeats all of the other people can have me. Like I will not cede control
Yeah.
as a weapon until one of you guys has claimed victory.
Oh, like
And
he
so-
wants he wants people to fight. For
Yeah,
him.
so basically I had like a
Okay.
mini I ran like a mini like
Fight club.
fist fight
Yeah.
club bracket.
Oh,
It
that's
actually
cool.
got won by a halfling rogue.
Sneak attack for an advantage or.
Colossus killer. I think it was.
Oh, that's Ranger.
Or sorry, Ranger. Sorry,
Ranger then,
not
yeah.
not a rogue, a ranger.
Oh, so Colossus Killer, you just use that to deal the damage to like the
Well,
larger person?
everyone was larger than
yeah,
he was.
true. Oh my,
So
that's a good setup for the player.
Like Colossus
yeah, no,
something,
yeah. It's the
or
Monster Hunter.
Colossus Slayer. Yeah, but
Monster
basically-
Hunter Ranger, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then yeah. So he won that by being tiny, but also being also having obviously a tons of like damage just from his role. I mean, honestly, like Rangers, the reworked Ranger,
Reworked Ranger is fun.
can do some interesting stuff. No, they didn't. They actually kind of they beat all the bigger opponents. What's up, Sovu? They actually beat the other opponents literally just through raw rolling, and like I remember the closest anyone got to like actually beating them was the Paladin. He would just try and keep grapple checking him, and he just kept rolling.
Would you have allowed them to smite with their hands?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that. But
Yeah.
basically, the grapples just kept failing because this kid would roll nat 20s like every time it was necessary. So a little bit of luck.
To be
and,
fair,
like,
yeah,
a
grapple
ver-
checks are super useful
Yeah.
in fist fights.
So that one was super random because I know I wanted to add the talking sword. I had it in my notes, but that was it. That was like the least prepared
were
I've
like,
ever
yeah.
been for something I wanted
You
to
like
put in.
add talking
I
sword,
was like
named
talking
person.
sword. I literally, I think my two notes were talking sword old man. Like that was the whole. That was all. I knew it. I had it. I wanted it in there. I didn't remember why
Funny,
or
yeah.
anything. And so like that was basically like one of the most improv moments I had was they like
Yeah.
went to look under like a shipwreck basically. And that's where they found him in a little pocket dimension that was like waterproof underneath. And so yeah, that was like a random bit of combat where I didn't expect
Yeah.
it, but as I was like kind of talking of the character,
Yeah.
and I realized that a lot of people wanted access to the sword, I was like,
It's
fight.
It's very funny you mentioned that. I did the same thing except it was talking hand old man.
Oh.
Yeah, although to be fair, the situation was a very much a different one than yours in the way that the talking hand was this like old like hunter kind of guy, kind of very much an old hunter from Bloodborne kind of thing.
Ah, yes.
And like the party fought essentially like a statue that was like imbued with an essence of this guy. That essentially, very much lots of lore involved. But the end of the fight had him try to cast disintegrate on a person's prosthetic arm.
Okay.
And because we both agreed we wanted to do something cool with that stuff and whatnot, and I kind of got the idea kind of midway through that if you pass a certain con save, instead of the hand disintegrating, the soul of that person is going to be imbued into that hand.
Nice.
And it kind of possesses the hand, and lots of very cool lore stuff and kind of RP stuff came out from that thing. And he just has a talking hand now that helps them with any like vampire monster hunting stuff. Which funny enough, I guess this might be just because I planned it, but like he ended up being very instrumental to their fight because he provided he could provide a variety of info on vampires since he really hunted vampires and werewolves. Right. So yeah.
No, that's cool. And I guess like a caveat, obviously we'll always mention this, but we like a lot of lore in our games.
We are both fairly narrative heavy DMs.
In a dungeon crawl, your volume of combat is going to be the whole
It is the
whole
dungeon.
game.
It's
Yeah.
puzzles and monster fights.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Maybe some RP during short rests and long rests.
Mm-hmm.
The RP being everyone having PTSD from the last fight.
Yeah, literally freaking out about
Yeah.
literally almost getting their heads cut off by a trap or whatever.
Yeah, no, yeah,
sure.
or like just having like a living like cloud kill spell attack them. I remember that was me in like one of the games I was in. Shout out to Kobe again. Like you know, like that game was like we were in a dungeon crawl and like I realized for me personally, dungeon crawls aren't really my, you know, like cup of tea really,
Mm-hmm.
but they are a thing that people enjoy and I can see the allure in them in the combat and you know the fact that you know if you ever spent a full session going through one hallway and making sure that you don't die from poison darts and you know it's fun.
Yeah.
You know, you can
Oh, yeah.
solve it very, you know, like if a person had, you know, just cast fly on the party,
Mm-hmm.
it's done.
Yeah.
Also solved.
For sure.
If you don't, you have to use a dead body as a like testing poll, which is weird. Which is hey,
Interesting.
yeah,
Hey,
exactly,
we'll
yeah,
take those. Yeah. So the volume will definitely always kind of depend on your game,
for sure.
and
yeah.
even for like different campaigns, I do run different, I think, volumes
Yeah.
for sure. When it's like when I feel like I want to put the players, and we'll talk a little bit about like the actual
Intensity and
like
different-
intensity of the fights, right? But when I feel like I want to put a lot of pressure on my players, and some campaigns sort of gravitate towards that, I'll introduce a lot of encounters, but I won't really put in encounters that aren't purposeful. I think just like you said, random encounters they can work really well.
Yeah,
But
but then
they,
they're not really random since
yeah.
you're using them. You know?
they work best in something like a dungeon crawl.
Yes,
Where
I agree.
it's literally like a like the original purpose, right, of like a random encounter was literally like while people are resting, you're supposed to kind of like
roll a d100 and you know roll see off that table whichever percentile works.
like if their passive was too low,
Yeah.
then maybe the person keeping watch, if their passive or their perception roll was too low, then you might introduce something to punish the party.
Well, it
that kind
mainly
of
would
thing.
be in the way I imagine if like you know the perception was low enough they get surprised by the thing.
Yeah.
But the thing attacks almost always.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, yeah, it depends very much on the DM also because you can always do the thing of you know maybe there's danger, maybe if you fail this roll the danger becomes actually combat.
Right.
You know, which is always
Well, that's what I did initially, because like I didn't understand like where to put the balance. So it was pretty much like every time they failed a perception roll, not every time, but a good amount of the
It's
time,
like
if
the
someone
cat
failed a
box thing.
perception
yeah.
roll, like something happened. Sometimes it was nothing, but like every time I made them feel, it sounds bad, but I made them feel like they were being punished for a bad watch. Because even
that's kind of brutal, yeah.
yeah, well, because like it wasn't even always fighting. I would just make them feel like they'd fucked up. So like, you know, they do their roll and they roll like a
You die.
6 on their percent or on their perception check,
Yeah.
and I'm like, you start to hear some movement in the back of the woods, like if they're in the woods or whatever. You start to hear some movement in the back of the woods. It doesn't seem like it's any one of your party members, and then they freak out and they wake up all their party members and it's like a deer or something.
Bro.
And then
okay.
like. And that's actually
funny,
That's
that's
still,
funny.
It's funny, but it's also still kind of brutal because
yeah.
it's supposed to be like long rests are supposed to be like
Well-
uninterrupted. So if they like go out far enough and like actually,
Oh yeah.
if you went by the traditional rules of like armor donning and things like
oh
that,
yeah, yeah.
like,
you
that'd be
donning your
insane.
doffing your armor to yeah, but the thing is, lots of long rests can incorporate 2 hours of flight activity. I think
mm-hmm.
as the general rule. So
Yeah.
usually like if my players would deal with that or it would mainly be in the way of So that's if you choose to investigate, you can roll checks and stuff. If you cast a spell or attack
Yeah.
something, you lose your long rest.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Is
Yeah.
like sometimes it hasn't happened because again I haven't used that in a long time. But in my early sessions, it would be like scary enough that people would be like, "I'd like to cast detect magic like immediately." Like that was like their first.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, all right, well, there goes your long rest.
Yeah.
Obviously I didn't understand like the balance of the mechanics. I didn't
Now
want
we
to.
learn,
I didn't.
yeah.
I didn't want to ask though. Have you ever ran or played in a campaign that uses armor donning and doffing for as like the standard mechanic? I feel like I put that almost in the same vein of like keeping track of your ammo.
Yeah, I honestly I would call it like a variance rule for me personally, even though it might be like an official thing.
Right.
I very much just if I don't think any of my campaigns, I don't really like running hardcore, in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Like variant encumbrance and like limiting carry weight and limiting, like, having a bunch of, numbers and stuff you have to run to be able to just function,
Right.
is a thing that people love. Like it adds, same way of how, like in Fallout New Vegas, for instance, you have the hardcore mode that keeps track of your like food, water, and drink.
Right.
Which adds further and maybe add to the complexity and difficulty, but aren't necessary for the game experience.
Right.
You can just you can just drink water and heal. You don't have to look for your thirst meter, your hunger meter, and all that stuff. And I kind of
you don't use thirst meter in your campaigns.
Moist meter perhaps, but yeah. But
Man, I can't imagine.
But like personally for me, I don't really like. I keep track of food, sure, but like just generally in the way of you have your rations. If you spend like more than like 10 days out, you're gonna start keeping track of it. But I usually assume, given that the players are gonna have like a couple of 100, 500, 300 gold, in their like treasury, they don't really need to. I can just say, yeah, you spend like what, 2 copper, 2 gold to get some more rations.
The whole idea
It's
of
not
like
gonna-
expediting the more like menial processes.
And sure, it's fun at lower levels.
Yeah.
I would say like it's very much keeping track of that stuff is fun at lower levels. But once you get to a certain high enough level, sure, like I guess there's a whole argument in regards of like the higher level you get, the more spells you get. For casters, that means you can solve issues that you're facing. Like you don't really have to keep track of rations when your cleric can cast create food and water.
Right.
Or
It becomes
or
pretty.
your
like,
paladin
null.
can purify food and drink. Or
Yeah.
you just maintain spoiled food and you just clean it each time you want to eat.
For sure.
Yeah.
What I have done, I was gonna mention this, not the donning off, but donning on, but there have been times where people put their items in certain places, like they'll put like
That
they'll,
sounds suspicious.
like they'll leave items on purpose, like away or like kept out, and then they'll enter a combat session and they'll be like, all right, I pull out my this, and I was like,
yeah.
you don't have that, right? Like if they
Yes.
left their armor at the blacksmith or something,
Yeah.
and then they accidentally ran into an encounter.
I do like to do that sometimes, but nowadays, given one of my parties that merge can be applied to, the other one, majority of people who can fight, they either can make their own weapons or they just Eldritch Knight. You're like, oh, I forgot my armor on purpose, or I'm sorry, I forgot my weapon and my sword and shield on purpose. Actually, DM, it's meant to make me look like an innocent person, and then I pull out my flame stung and +1 shield, and I'm like,
Dude, I don't know.
get
Sometimes
wrecked,
Sometimes I'll just put it in there to see how hard party members will
Yeah.
simp for their other party members.
Oh,
Be like, oh my god, we have to protect this idiot now because he left his armor.
oh
with
yeah,
fucking
no, for sure.
Billy Joe at the armor smith.
No,
and now he's,
that's
like,
was always
got an
very fun,
11
yeah.
AC.
Yeah. In my case, I kind of fooled myself when I realized I think the party was going through like kind of this like going into like this nightclub, and they had to go through like a security checkpoint, pat down, submit any weapons and stuff. And I realized the majority of the party didn't need weapons to kill people, and I was like, well, that's what you get when almost everyone's like dipped into casters. And the people who aren't dipped into casters can, like Eldritch Knight or one of the others, I get this cool thing where you can make martial weapons out of your own body. He's like Diamond Head from Ben 10, if you think about it, actually.
I see.
I just that's the inspiration. I got talked. Yeah, Dexter, if you're listening to this, yeah, you're literally just Diamond Head from Ben 10.
Yeah, I like putting encounters in there. This doesn't just extend the combat. I know we've drifted a little bit away from combat. We'll get back on topic soon, but I liked there was like one point in one of the Critical Role episodes where they had like a bar,
Shout out to Critical Role, sponsor us.
D&D Beyond. Hello. They were like basically partying, and one of their characters had their purse stolen.
Oh, with all the money in it.
With their actual, because like you technically, like if you
You
look
have
at
a
your
purse, yeah, that
items,
is
you
true, yeah.
technically have like a coin purse.
Yeah, no, for
where
sure.
you keep your
satchel,
currency, your
yeah.
satchel. And so like that was, I think, an interesting note, and I don't think that should be that's like a good way to start combat too.
Yeah.
Is like if
Gold.
especially if your party members are drunk and you steal their shit.
They wanna fight the
They will
person
fight
who-
people
yeah.
for it. They will.
Yeah.
Talk about mixing in combat. If you want a bar fight, you can always get one.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I remember in my case, the party members, after fighting this really bad fight and stuff, I rolled on a D100 because I was curious. I was also starting out in DMing, so I wasn't. It was like level 2. They just turned level 2,
Yeah.
I think, or even I think they were actually level 1 perhaps. And they were doing the fight, and essentially they came out of the sewer tunnel, literally like pushed open the manhole, and they have this like this grung mob boss with his like minotaur like bodyguard, and I tried to do my worst Cockney accent, and like he was like, oh, like I'm not gonna do it here just for my own sake, but essentially he mugged the whole party, and they all handed him 5 gold, whether they wanted to or not, and also all the trophies they got.
Oh.
Easiest way of making the party hate a person very fast.
Yep.
Steal their hard earned and fought after trophies, where they decapitated the head of this like rat folk kind of like were rat psionic thing,
Right.
and they were gonna bring that to the town's guard for like payment and rewards,
Yeah.
right? And then he was like, he looked at that and like, that's kind of weird. I want that. Give it to me or you're dead. And they're all low on spell slots, and they all finished this really tough fight that they
Right.
had. So some of those things were like, and they were really, they really did get pissed off, and that's the point is, just deliver that this world, sometimes it doesn't matter whether you just went through a tough fight, the rest of the world is living their life.
Kick them while they're down.
Oh
yeah.
and it's very much, and it's pushed them onto full thing where they wanted to like essentially either kill or fuck up this mob boss, and like get revenge and stuff. Who knows? Maybe they might do it.
Yeah.
They've diverged into other plot points now, but like you never know.
Yeah. So this might actually roll into I guess our next topic.
Yeah.
Pretty well. So
Yeah.
when we're talking about like putting it in combat, obviously we prefer purposeful combat, but when you're implementing combat, what strategies do you use to keep players engaged? When you are about to implement a combat session, obviously they can be long, they can be short. What are some of your priorities when you're running combat to make sure that the party is like actually not just interested but also like invested in the combat and what's going on?
I guess the first question you can always ask yourself when designing an encounter: why are they fighting them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the very easiest thing. Like, why is the party fighting this? These gray rangers. Why are they fighting these whatever monster you're gonna throw at them? And that way you could usually like asking yourself that question and realizing perhaps I can hone in or amplify these, that reason.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be through a minor thing or, perhaps, usually it's for gold.
Right.
Gold is a very good,
Money.
money, it's the best carrot to put on a stick,
Yeah.
It's the golden carrot, shout out to Minecraft. But it's very much, that's the thing that you use to, most people especially this can work in almost most games to an amount, is that no matter what your alignment is, unless you're someone who purely does not want money, at least some members of the party want money and want to get paid. And whether you're apathetic towards gaining it or not, very much it's most times you can easily pull a party towards any direction with the promise of reward and bounty. And I would say very simple treasure. Treasure is a really good motivation. Although personally for me, I it's a good way to get people started. Once you get to a point where they have treasure and they want that motivation. They want that reason to why they're fighting this person. Maybe I would say having a reoccurring enemy or reoccurring nemesis, really.
Well, like what you mentioned earlier, like you can kind of make the party dislike someone enough to just want to fight them, and then at that point they're invested because their purpose.
They don't
is
even want
very
money.
Clear.
It's personal.
Yeah, yeah. It's
make it personal.
Personal, personal, attack that that's like all you really need, right? I think building around your NP,
make them assholes. Make them
assholes.
The easiest way of doing it. Make the bad guy like a massive dick, or just make him like this self-righteous and very pretentious and stuck-up person that always talks down on the party and goads them to attacking him. Yeah. And then when they fight him and win, they feel so satisfied because you're like, who's smiling now? Who's laughing now?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I definitely in my campaigns, I don't focus too much on a lot of the times, like you said, early on gold and just in general
pushes the party in a direction.
It pushes the party in a direction. It kind of clumps them together because they're all kind of under the same
first push in the minecart,
Yes, and then you can kind of develop further. I like to avoid currency as a big point of as a central point of motivation, because like you said, it loses its luster really, really quickly.
Once they have enough money to get their stuff, Why would they get more money? They have enough money to retire.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Yeah.
I like
go ahead.
I like looking for sometimes social encounters for me are
Yes.
more worth the money. Like if I'm asking if they need to get cash or they need to get like a monetary favor,
Yeah.
I like for them to seek out NPCs instead of like seeking out the money themselves.
Oh, interesting.
I feel like that strategy is
Haggling
a
for
little bit more
bounties also.
gratifying. Yeah, exactly.
Like in The Witcher, like when you had to like you haggle each time and you're like, oh, hire more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuff, it's good social stuff also.
Yeah. But for keeping players engaged, I agree fully. I think that once like treasure and money loses its luster, I think you have to make it more personal.
Yeah.
I think one of the best ways to keep people engaged is, again, it depends on the party, but a lot of parties do like the clout.
Yes.
Do like playing
Fame.
Yeah, fame.
Notoriety, infamy.
That comes with fortune.
Pirates.
Yeah, notoriety is like
Yeah.
a really good reason for people to fight. So I think what I like to do is I sometimes like to splash in, especially when they're switching locations.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Like people will hear about one of their previous encounters. Like,
they enter the tavern, everyone quiets down.
You guys were the group that like
killed this dragon.
Dragon up on the hill or whatever. But like giving them like encounters that will give them clout. I like to do that a lot.
Yeah.
Which is actually fairly easy to do because you can always stat block change things.
Oh,
So like
for
you
sure.
can
Yeah.
run a dragon that only does like 2d6. Like nothing in the game is stopping you
It's
from
your
just
world,
like
really.
down statting a dragon. So they can fight a dragon level too.
Yeah.
And like
yeah, you can find a wormling and like
no,
for sure,
yeah. But they can fight something that they can feel is impressive, and then I can use it to like, kind of pulsate it through the world so that people hear about it. Because like at the end of the day, at least for my campaigns, I want the characters, like the player characters, to feel extraordinary.
Yes,
Like,
I agree.
I feel like they should stand out in the world that they're in.
Yeah.
If not, then like,
Badass
either your
music,
world has to be like crazy fantastical, which is totally valid.
Yeah.
But like, I like to run worlds where there is a very serious contrast, like showing them
The
even
players
at
shine
low
above
level.
the average. Yeah.
Yeah, even at low level, they have these abilities and these things. So whenever they're entering combat, I want them to feel like their combat is going to make an impact that'll be heard.
And I feel like we covered that to an amount on our previous episode on RP and downtime.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just giving that impact and giving that kind of agency to players is a very important thing, and I very much feel
Mm-hmm.
No, it's especially I feel I fully agree with the whole combat and the clout. Those are always for me now, for majority of the combats, it's for one of the games I run, the combat is mainly right now the party doesn't really it's not gold that they want, and it's very much the fact that they during the beginning of the kind of very much early on in the game, they signed a contract to eliminate a rat problem.
Mm-hmm.
That rat problem has now escalated to taking down an entire terrorist group.
Yeah.
And the thing is now, despite they've had money, they have enough money to almost all of them to depart and retire and stuff.
Go buy
except
land,
they're
grow crops, raise a cow,
or just have a beach house. There's And the thing is, you think about that, and then you think about right now the party, the reason why they're fighting this guy is not because of that. It's fully just because they want to leave the city.
Right.
Because also that same group has kind of locked down the city.
Right.
So now it's really very much every single person has a different reason for the fight. And I would say that's a key thing, is to keep in mind sometimes, sure, there's the party motivation, but how about individual player reasons to fight this fight?
Right.
One person wants to gain experience, other gold, other knowledge, other just wants to help his friends, having those separate motives and different sources for this, all those converging, reasons,
Mm-hmm.
is very much, I feel, a very nice thing that really does help your party each party member feel unique in why they're fighting,
Right.
I feel like that's a good thing to ask sometimes is, why are you fighting in this fight,
Right.
That person's for gold. How about you? Is it because of family? Is it because of, I really do love the whole, family thing and, found family stuff,
Yeah.
It's a really good, motive sometimes for players, and, it's a nice, it adds some, goodness to the world, I guess, know?
Yeah, no, that's what I enjoy about playing with people I don't know. Well, at least I didn't really know what that was like until I played with a bunch of people that I didn't know and that didn't know each other. Because then
Shout out to CU Boulder D&D.
Yeah, shout out to CU Boulder D&D, because it was a really cool dynamic, right? Because when I did the first season of that, of like the homebrew version, not after I like after the
city of Velasco.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Unrelated to Josue Velasco.
It is. I think.
No. Kobe said yeah.
Oh.
Kobe, if you're watching, please
Kobe,
say
you're
yes.
Cringe.
Yeah, no.
Kobe, you're banned. Yeah, it was really cool because like I brought them together and I basically told them, sorry, this is like a Grimdark campaign. You guys aren't making any money. You guys have to do this because so and so, like you're under contract.
Find your reasons, yeah.
The big reason was that they all either owed a massive debt to the government, or were
Suicide Squad,
or were like previous like prisoners that were getting off.
Yeah. That's a really cool hook. Yeah.
Yeah. So they all didn't know each other, but they knew that they were all like baddies.
They were all stuck. You know? Yeah, they were all stuck in the same cell for different reasons.
So when I put
Squad.
combat in front of them, a lot of the times it was very mundane. But what ended up what I hoped had happened, and what did end up happening was kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And a lot of the fights,
the friends we found along the way.
It was less about like what they were fighting. It was more about like keeping the party alive. And so that's when and again, we'll cover this in a little bit, but that's actually when I tuned up the difficulty sometimes.
Oh.
Because that's when I
Raise
knew
the stakes.
that like the danger of death actually made the connections between the party members stronger.
Yeah, that's a really good way of seeing it. Yeah.
And so I really liked that aspect, and it was definitely like working out at the end. You know, they were at the end of the line pretty much, like they were pretty much done.
Dramatic fantasy fight music.
Yeah, literally. That was one of the coolest fights ever. I got I got my Remoraz commission.
Oh yeah, shout out to Lexi. Yeah,
shout out to Lexi for that commission. That shit was sick. Like a homebrewed like Remoraz variant. And I remember that shit looked cool. There was so much impact because the party at that point, like sure they were saving the world, whatever. But to me, and I feel like to them at that point, it was so peripheral because once they were fighting, it was all about staying together and keeping everyone alive. And man, they pulled out the stops to
all those divine interventions.
Not even. It wasn't even like divine interventions. They
single-use magic items.
They had to be very creative.
Yeah.
Because what they realized, I think the biggest panic moment was that they killed the Remoraz, but I had a passive ability where if you were inside the Remoraz, it would passively deal damage to you.
Yeah.
Until you got ripped out.
You swapped it out for like poison or right?
Yeah, I made it like a sickly like poison variant. And so yeah, like one of them like they basically killed it. Yeah. One of them did damage from the inside, but they were like fully poisoned and on death's door, and they were inside. And so
the intensity.
Yeah.
That moment when you kill the big bad and you're still in initiative.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
I wish we would have had more time to, because I was looking to have at least one NPC die.
Which is I feel that's a topic we should discuss.
Unfortunately, the one NPC I did want to kill there was just like insane. Like he was just
too OP.
He was like rolling cracked, and I didn't feel right. Just like fudging his roll so that he would die. Like he literally was just rolling like so good. But the character that they turned into a giant ape was not rolling so high. It was basically useless and pretty much died.
Oh, rest in peace.
To save Tuck as well. So yeah, rest in peace. That character whose name I don't remember. He was the chef.
The chef.
He was like the camp chef.
He will be remembered.
His meals were dank. They gave minor boons.
Nice.
But yeah, back to what we were talking about. Like the engagement a lot of times comes from just the party dynamic, and so I think that's why I put a lot of effort and I place a lot of value in investing in your party's dynamic. Because, and I think other DMs will kind of share this opinion too. The best games require the least amount of like outward work from a DM and the players if the players have like a good dynamic amongst themselves. That way I don't have to like it's like about once that's developed, the DM just has to do a lot less. Like I don't have to ask them to interact. When the party dynamic is there, they're going to interact. I don't need to ask them to go places. They have their own goals and motives. Yeah. Momentum. Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it. Once the party has it, they have a lot of momentum and they're going to keep kind of cruising through the campaign.
It's like the snowball thing, like especially for like snowball effect. And like, once you reach a certain point, the party is very much self-sufficient in generating RP and connections and stuff that you don't really have to do anything as much as just help them run the rules, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And so I think we've answered a good amount about like theoretically how to keep people engaged.
Yeah.
We should probably talk about keeping people engaged
In actual
literally
combat.
in actual combat. And
Run
some of
it
the
fast.
strategies that run it fast, that's a good one. And some of the strategies that we like to use, I think we might only get to like 2 questions today, but that's totally
Yeah.
cool.
This is why it's a
Um,
multi-part session, yeah.
Yeah. It's from a more literal perspective, when you're running games, how do you like just keep people like on the ball? Because I think the
Yes.
biggest problem with combat in general, and like the combat sessions that feel like the worst,
Yeah.
at least to me in terms of what I've run and I've played in, are the ones that feel like they went too long for
slog.
no reason. A
Yeah.
slog. So what kind of active strategies do you implement to keep players from getting either like checked out, or just in general to prevent your combat from going so long that the players are going to check out anyway?
That is so. I try to do as much as I can, and lots of times, the key. I feel like a key mechanic I mainly try to implement when I, have fully prepped properly for a game, is get some engaging music.
Right.
Get some thematic music that makes the players feel like badasses.
Right.
You know, give them music that makes them feel like either they're under like insurmountable odds, or that they are, like the light in the dark.
Right.
Like have that, like very much high energy, super vibrant, super like intense music. And lots of times that can like, because mind you, especially I guess it very much depends on the size of the party also, because I would say
Yep.
but in general you can apply a variety of mechanics that sure, like the bigger the party, most times the harder it is to keep everyone engaged, just given how initiative runs.
Right.
And person at the top, by the time you get to the bottom, will probably be checked out to some amount.
Right.
know?
Like with
Yeah.
bigger parties, it gets a lot
Like an
more
8-player,
difficult.
10-player,
Yeah.
15-player. Shout out to Kobe. Shout out to the Crom deck and the Golden Abyss. Yeah, no,
Cannot
unhinged.
imagine.
I would never. But yeah, instrumental odds really. I can never do that. But yeah,
No, thank you.
but with my campaigns, my parties usually, I try to keep the music intense, keep it circulating, keep it varied, and try to match the theme with the music. Like when the party is fighting a tough part, change the music and make them realize, oh my god, the music is choreographing. Like, so I say, look at combat in video games. Really,
Right.
how does the game dev keep the player engaged? Multi-phase combat. Having tiered combat and different events and stuff happening at certain thresholds or conditions.
Shout out to when the Remraz got at half health and the
Yeah.
stage started changing.
Exactly. Yeah.
I
Yes.
started creating like death pockets where ice was
Like,
falling.
oh, nice.
Yeah. Or there were like growths.
Oh, yeah, nice. Yeah, like having that stuff, like have them be, I would say look at maybe any of the like from software games like boss fights.
Yeah.
The good ones, like sure there's some of them like from the older ones that might be a bit more, like an acquired taste, but some the multi-phase ones where you kill the thing and then it comes back again and it slowly swaps its moveset. That keeps you really engaged while keeping a lengthy combat,
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
that's a very key thing here, and like I feel like it's that's a very important part of it. I would say a secondary thing would be making sure to run the combat as tight as possible from your end. Have all your monster rolls ready, or even sometimes I remember shout out to Matt again for I remember when we played in his Witcher game, he used like damage averages
Yeah.
instead of rolling dice, and that's a very effective way of keeping the momentum running on your end, and keeping that like essentially try to minimize the time that's spent on thinking and deciding on your turn.
Yeah.
Like as a DM, you just want to be like, okay, so is your turn done? Okay, cool. This thing moves here, it attacks, and that's hits, doesn't hit damage, you take it. You're up. Try to keep that speedy, very concise and informative stuff. And I guess sometimes it depends on the game. Lots of people like very much. I try to do it more often. Add more like thematic flourishes, and when someone's attacking, you're like, oh, you see this, you see this bartender, he, kind of instead of saying he takes his action and his bonus action and his like movement, be like, for instance, he takes, you see the barkeep kind of look at you with his, eyes like, the steely resolve, and you know, like he has a plan in mind, and then you see him like, you know, bolt behind the bar, you know, bar itself, and then you kind of hear this like sound of gun cocking, like a shotgun cocking, and then you see him go up, and then he takes his action to shoot. Does it hit? You know, and then, you know, whether it hits or not, you know, friends, it hits, and he was using a shotgun, so, you know, he hits you in the guts, and it's a crit. And, you know, you try to narrate all that stuff and make it seem more story based and thematic than, you know, what you're just rolling numbers, you know?
Yeah.
Really.
You did mention one thing that I think is important, and it's just something that I definitely do. So I use like a rolling tray.
Yes.
And I have like my
roll in front of the players
yeah.
also. I'm very much a proponent of rolling in front.
I don't always. I do it when like the roll really matters.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like I usually roll behind. I guess that's something that we will chat about for sure. At some
next part.
Most likely next part.
To be continued.
But one thing that you mentioned, and something, so a small optimization that you can make is, so especially if you're running like one big bad, the thing that I like to do is, for all of the possible attacks and damages that I'm going to do, I like to put the different rolls, like the different dice, in different corners of my tray.
Oh, yeah, true. Especially
so
rolling
like,
physical dice, I agree.
Yeah, exactly. So for physical
the fireball
dice,
damage.
I guess, like, first off, in terms of recommendations, if you guys are able to use stuff electronically, I like my actual dice. But if you guys are rolling a ton of dice with like really, really big numbers, not only does it take forever to count once you've rolled it, even if you're quick, but like, yeah, it's infinitely easier to use an automatic roller. So have a threshold for yourself of like, I think I cut it off at like 6+. Like if I'm rolling like 7 damage dice,
if you're rolling 26 d6,
I'll roll it on an,
you know,
yeah, I'll roll it on an online roller. That is one really quick way, and this is true for players too. I recommend this for players too.
Yeah.
Have your damage die ready to go. Don't like. I know it looks aesthetic to have like your die in a line, but especially for combat
have
to
it
run
in your
more
hand,
fluidly.
ready to roll out,
yeah,
you know?
have it either in your hand or just like very near. If you know you're gonna do this attack and you're gonna do most likely this amount of die damage, obviously there's like variants with crits and things like that, and you have to be ready to act in the moment. But any like small things you can do like that to optimize your rolls are great. I know like most of the people that I know who play rogues religiously have like their like a bag of d6s.
Yes.
They just like have them.
Oh yeah, the rogue d6 bag.
Yeah, the
d6 stack. No, that's true, and it's a fun. It's a thing, you know. Plan ahead. You know that you're gonna use all those d6s for the sneak attack. You're gonna roll high damage. You know, a high amount of dice.
Right.
Have that be ready. You know.
Yep. And to Nampi's point, which is really good. Yeah, that's like another small note, and this is something that I like to slide in.
Yes. I agree.
Tell the person who's on deck.
You're on deck, yeah.
Yeah. That's a very small thing that makes a very huge difference, because like it's sometimes players check out, you know, you get distracted, you know. I encourage players to not use their phone, but sometimes they're on their phone or whatever. Or a lot of us use laptops or whatever while we're running a campaign. Maybe someone's doing some reading for a class. Exactly. We're all college students on top of D&D players, so we know how to we min-max our time a lot of times, so it's easy for people to check out. But and especially in longer combat, it's totally valid.
Yeah.
But if someone kind of checked out and you just give them that subtle reminder, yo, you're next, and then you go back to like the current player in the turn, that small comment makes a big difference, because then at the very least, you know, your next person's probably going to be ready to go. Not necessarily the whole line all the way down, but to have the next person kind of ready, it's that kind of quick movement that you're looking for in a campaign. So yeah, I think splitting your die, knowing what die you need, is like really big. Like you don't want to be fumbling through a bag that has like every die when all you're going to be using is D4s and D6s. It doesn't make sense.
I agree. I feel like there's one way, if you want to be really super efficient, have a maximum on each player's turn. You can, you know, like you have 3 minutes. After the 3 minutes, you're skipped.
Right.
You know, and just have that limit can sometimes be beneficial to, you know, like put people on a timer. I mean, less, you know, like 1 minute or 2 minutes, you know, like you're up. They spend too long taking the turn, you're skipped.
Yeah.
You know, keep that. That works more like I guess results oriented and brutal. You know, like combat heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Where you have to be efficient and stuff, because you're going to be running 5 monsters on your end. You have a player of like maybe 10 or 8. You have to be effective in that regard. You know, like 6 or no matter the number. If you're running like a large horde of monsters, also the number of monsters is the key
that makes
thing.
a big difference.
Yeah.
And so like. Yeah, like you're saying, if something really small that I like to do, totally wasteful, but it helps me organize really well, is I actually print out like if I have 4 monsters,
Stat,
I'll print
print
out
the
their
stat
little
blocks.
stat blocks and I'll
Yeah,
put
yeah,
them
yeah.
on like a sheet of paper and I'll actually
Yeah.
print it out. Because having that in front of me instead of having to like
Flip through. Yeah.
look through the stat or like flip through, and then if those, this is another really big one. If you're running something that uses spells, have the spells that you're gonna use open and ready to either read out
the
quickly
info. Yeah.
or note it, like write, have a notebook and
know the
write out
DC. Know
like
the effect.
it's a
Yeah.
DC this check, it's going to do this much damage on a save, and like because like a lot of it can be flavor text,
Yes.
and so a lot of the
the
times
mechanics matter also when you're dealing combats.
yeah,
you know?
exactly. So like no, like write out the important logistics. What save is it? What DC it is?
Yeah.
Whether it's a cone, how big, and that's like all you need, and then like the kind of damage.
No,
If
for
you
sure,
just
yeah.
kind of jot that down, because that's probably what takes the longest, I think, for DMs. Or
Yeah.
at least what I've noticed that slows me down a lot of the times
you
is
cast
when
a
I'm
spell
trying
and
to
you're like,
cast a spell.
what does
And
field
like
line do?
I'm like, oh shit, like I probably should have had this right. Now I do the note taking thing.
Yes.
And I also like cross out. I like the nice thing about the sheet is I like crossing stuff
Oh,
out
you
and
cross out the
highlighting it.
spells you've done.
So like if I know if someone hit me with like an ice storm or something that is gonna take multiple turns of damage that I have to keep making a save,
Oh, you
I'll
like
circle it.
Yeah.
And then I know, oh, this person, they'll remind me, oh, this
That's a
person
very
needs to make a
interesting
save.
way of doing it.
Oh, I know exactly where the save is. It's plus
I
whatever.
never run combat in person. I never run D&D in person, so that's the thing. Yeah, I know.
I can't run it on
Screw you. Yeah.
online. Online does introduce some new challenges.
Yes.
So I guess
And also
like
benefits, I would
moral of
say.
the I agree. So I think moral of the story here for us in general is running it fast is
Yes.
probably the easiest way to keep your players engaged.
Speeds and efficiency and prep. Know what you're gonna run. Know what you're gonna roll. I feel that's the most important thing to keep people engaged. And I would say add more thematic stuff. You know.
Yeah.
Add more narrative stuff to make them feel that you're not just rolling dice. Because once you have that story part, maybe like sprinkle in some like conversation.
Dude, have your villain shit talk your
Exactly.
party all the time.
That keeps them.
You
That's
have
a very good way of keeping them engaged. And I would say even cut. Sometimes there's a point where you have to compromise, and like you have to make sure that the combat is run within the session. Carryover sessions is. Carryover sessions are just sometimes a pain to run, just because you lose the momentum from session to session. If you're running like a two session combat, sometimes that can get hard to keep that amp and speed running.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a key thing to just consider. But sometimes that is the compromise. It's better to keep maybe cutting the session short is better sometimes than having a run long and have the people be dead by the end of it.
Yeah.
Like I've had it happen in my games where I'm running one fight ran really long, and I realized that I could have really stopped at this point and kept up the momentum, and the players were they were engaged both like in terms of like energy and also in terms of the narrative.
Yeah.
So I can at the very least rely on the fact that their players were engaged narratively to be able to run that game.
Oh, for sure. That's one important thing that I see a lot of value in, and this is something that I've done pretty often. Is I've definitely cut sessions short, and sometimes I have to introduce. Sometimes you just have to kind of freestyle and introduce a story element, like randomly into the combat, because like the combat could have run from A to B, right? But if you need to stop in the middle, pop something in there, pop some
8.5.
intrigue there.
A,
Literally, like,
comma B.
drop something in there, put in an NPC
Yeah.
that they know, or like a familiar sound, or like another villain.
You hear a screech from your past or something,
Yeah, literally have
do
the
that drama.
entire
Be
party
dramatic,
black out,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't feel like you cut the combat short. It feels like you're kind of bifurcating it, and you're creating two
Segmenting
different
it,
points of tension.
Yes.
Which can be
Oh,
really
that is
beneficial
a very good
for
point.
the fight, as well as making sure that you're because like that is probably the biggest like pacing killer is when the session even really well run combat, if your really well run combat runs too long, like keeping tension and keeping like
when
people
get
on
tired,
their toes for 4 hours,
yeah.
that's exhausting. Like I can't even
4 hours,
pay attention for more than 8 seconds at a time when I'm in class, Like it's like a lot to ask.
Yeah,
of
no,
players.
true.
And not to say that dungeon like 5-hour dungeon crawls where you're just like going ham is not fun.
That's
Those
for
can be
that's for
super
people
fun.
that enjoy it. Yeah.
But for me personally, and just what I've noticed is, I think if my combat is running the length of the session, I will never push the length of the session.
Yeah.
I will make some effort to end it on.
Sometimes you need to compromise.
Yeah, and sometimes it makes it more exciting. Sometimes that improvisation gives you a bigger challenge for the next session to pick
I
up
do
at.
agree. Yeah, no, I very much do
And
agree.
also gives your players a little bit more intrigue.
And the best thing you can do is, throw in, like during that cutoff, do the very simple thing of that cutoff being the second stage of the fight.
Yeah.
Like be like, like after you take down this like vampire lord to, like he's bloodied. You can see his like cuts on everywhere, scorch marks and such. And then you can see him like very slowly, like he lets out this bestial roar and starts transforming into this like polar bear. And you're like, bro, what the fuck?
Yeah,
and you can. That's where we end the session.
Yeah,
see you later, guys.
Do you have like a crazy ending? You also give yourself more time to prepare. Like, maybe the first chunk of the combat wasn't what you wanted.
Unoptimized, and then you optimize hotfix.
Exactly.
Hotfixing is a key thing also.
Yeah.
Sometimes when the session's running too long, it won't hurt to just cut down the health.
Yeah.
If you gotta do what you gotta do.
Oh, I didn't say he was bloody, but he's been bloodied.
He has a bloody nose. Sorry, when I said he was bloodied, I didn't mean he was at half health. His nose was
like it is literally bleeding. Yeah.
But
crazy enough, talking about cutting sessions short, we
gotta cut our session short. Yeah.
So yeah, combat. It's a hefty topic.
Yes.
We'll be covering a lot
it's a
more
fight,
topics ideally. I guess we'll call it here. Thank you guys for tuning in.
And
make sure that if you missed this episode, or if you know people that might be interested in hearing about combat,
we're on YouTube and our VODs are on Twitch also.
We're on YouTube. Check out our VODs.
All the interwebs,
And you can also catch us next week, as we will most likely be rolling into the next part of combat. And so this is probably the first time where we won't be doing like a topic poll. But if you guys are on the Discord, let us know what specific questions you guys want answered.
And we'll post that earlier than usual, given that we don't have to run a topic poll.
Yep. And combat part 2 coming next week. But other than that, thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next week.
See y'all. Yeah.